Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm joined by Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hi, Joe.
Seb and I were joined today by the magnificent Matt Slater, who's here to talk us through the current situation with Saudi Arabia, Qatar's beIN Sports, which is the Middle East North Africa broadcaster partner for the Premier League, and of course Newcastle United as well, who we'll get to more towards the end of the episode. Seb, what are the key questions that we're trying to understand today?
Well, it's complicated, Joe. Fundamentally, I suppose from a Premier League perspective, we're trying to work out what the consequences of this are on the prospective Newcastle takeover. Matt does a really good job because there's an awful lot of it's a very nebulous topic, and there's an awful lot of unanswered questions and questions that he can only speculate around. But he's absolutely fascinating, and it's as clear in my mind as this is ever going to be, this topic now. So thank you to Matt.
Absolutely.
For that.
Yeah. Now listen, and also if you want to read Matt's work, you can get a 30-day free trial to join The Athletic by visiting theathletic.com/Tifo. And I would highly encourage everyone who's listening to do so, even just to read Matt's work. He's my favourite of the journalists that I work with. And I think you'll understand why after listening to today's episode. So many synergies, Seb.
Yeah, you kind of told Adam Crafton he was your favourite too, so...
I like Adam Crafton as well. It's hard. It depends who's here, but I would say, Matt today and most days, Adam all of those other days. Without further ado, though, because this is too much ado, I leave you in the cool hands and the warm embrace of Mr. Matt Slater. Okay, Matt Slater, riddle me this. The Saudi Arabian government has permanently barred the Premier League's Qatar-based Middle East broadcast partner, beIN, from operating in the kingdom. beIN was the rights holder with a £500 million deal with the Premier League that runs until 2022. So currently it means that there is no legal way, as far as I'm aware, of watching the Premier League in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What I want to ask you is what the justification for that is, because the Saudi Arabians have sort of suggested that it's about practices that restrict competition, but presumably that's the purpose of being a rights holder to the Premier League. So how does that add up?
Well, that's a very good question. Does it add up? So the official reason that was being given by the General Authority for Competition in Saudi Arabia, so their competition authority, they've been investigating beIN for a while. They actually have got previous here. This has been rumbling on for a few years. They've been upset with beIN in the past. I think it was around the Africa Cup of Nations in 2018, and there was something last year to do with the Asian Football Championships. beIN had been fined before. And it's always about the same issue, and that is this sort of bundling of rights and bundling of the sports package, which to anyone that lives in this country is, that's what you do, right? If you're Sky Sports, you bundle stuff up, and if you're an Aston Villa fan, you don't get to choose the Aston Villa games. You can if you want to buy them individually on Now TV, but you would take the Sky package, and that could include bits of cricket and golf. I know they've kind of moved away from that model, but it certainly includes non-Aston Villa stuff, and that's pretty much the way it is. I might like only Game of Thrones, but I will have to watch some of the stuff my wife watches as well. That's just the nature of premium rights, be it sport or entertainment. So the actual case that Saudis have chosen to pick on beIN for this time is to do with Euro 2016. So apparently beIN very naughtily, if you wanted to watch Euro 2016 games, said you had to take a subscription with us and perhaps watch some other games from another tournament. And the Saudi Competition Authority thinks that's absolutely outrageous, and as a result has permanently terminated beIN's right to operate in Saudi Arabia. Now, look, they haven't really had a right to operate in Saudi Arabia for about 3 years, so it's the kind of permanently terminated as opposed to just unable to work there, operate there, that's different this time. And they've also fined them 10 million rials, which is 2.1 million quid or so. So a pretty emphatic ruling, and it dates back to Euro 2016.
Matt, what are the consequences of this likely to be? Presumably, with being stripped of their license permanently, there's now a broadcasting vacuum or space to occupy. What happens next?
Well, that again is a very good question, and we are kind of fumbling around in the dark for answers here a little bit. Perhaps the easiest way to describe this is that this is just making formal and official what has been the case in Saudi Arabia for about 3 years, ever since Qatar fell out with its local neighbours, with many of the other Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia and UAE. Its nearest neighbours, and Bahrain and Egypt as well. But the dispute seems particularly bitter between Saudi Arabia and UAE. So beIN, who are based in Doha, they're sort of the sporting offshoot of Al Jazeera, the famous news channel. Very successful. They've certainly raised Qatar's profile, put Qatar on the map as a kind of centre of journalism and broadcasting. And beIN have been one of the biggest buyers of sports rights anywhere around the world, and have invested millions, billions in European, British sports rights, not just football, you name it, F1, Wimbledon, rugby, and have the sports rights, certainly for the Premier League, and as I said, all the other good stuff as well, World Cup, Champions League, La Liga, for the Middle East and North Africa region. And that is everywhere from Morocco to Oman. It's, I think, 17, 18 countries. And Saudi Arabia is one of the key markets there. It's certainly one of the wealthiest countries, but it's one of the biggest as well. It's got quite a big population, Saudi Arabia. So it's a really important market. Now, ever since that diplomatic, economic dispute erupted June 2017, beIN haven't really been able to operate there, not legally anyway. And we've had this remarkable situation where a very sophisticated pirate operation called beOutQ has been operating there. They started off just by pinching beIN's satellite feed, and lots and lots of beIN boxes and equipment was impounded and just rebadged as beOutQ. There's been a big dispute about how involved the Saudi government, the Saudi state, have been in that operation. You could say the jury's out on that one, but certainly most experts I speak to are pretty convinced that it has, the level of sophistication is that it's been state directed, or at the very best, but a blind eye has been turned to it. So beOutQ's been running. beIN hasn't been able to operate there legally. Some people have kind of kept up their kind of contracts sort of on the quiet. So beIN estimates 20, 30,000 people still watch its feed, but millions of people watch this pirated beOutQ feed. And even when they turned the satellite feed off under a lot of pressure at the beginning of this season, it was being done via the Arabsat satellite, which is its operation is based in Riyadh, and it's run by a Saudi. Saudi Arabia is the biggest shareholder in that operation. Even when they turned that off, the IPTV, the streaming operation of beOutQ, it's the genie's out of the bottle. And now there's sort of a fear that the pirates are being pirated, and you've just created this monster. So beIN hasn't been able to operate in Saudi Arabia for a long time, and you've had this as you say, a vacuum, a legal vacuum, and there's been big impact on beIN. beIN have laid people off. They've started to send back rights. They declined to continue with F1 because they just didn't think it was economic. And you've had this enormous and slow, complicated, long-running saga of rights holders around the world, everyone from the NFL to NBC to entertainment brands to FIFA, the lot, all asking Saudi Arabia to do something about beOutQ, do something about the protection of intellectual property rights in their jurisdiction. And they haven't until, and this brings us up to sort of kind of the present time, until about a month or so ago, when a World Trade Organization report pretty much backed Qatar. Qatar made a complaint. They made a complaint a couple of years ago. They're asking for damages. That's still rumbling on and does appear to be, again, heading in Qatar's direction. But the WTO report on the matter basically said, Saudi Arabia, you're not following the rules. You are not giving legal rights holders recourse to justice in your courts, and you need to step up the fight against piracy. So that's where we're at. And then, we've all thought, okay, Saudi got that message, and if Saudi Arabia wants to buy Newcastle, which is I'm sure where we're heading next, you are going to have to do something about piracy. And that's what I thought was going to happen. And then, boom, Tuesday, no, they've doubled down, and instead of slowly, lifting the ban on beIN, they've gone the other direction and emphatically banned them.
Just before we go to Newcastle, I want to get a better sense of what beIN is. Is there a European equivalent, just for the sake of demonstrating the dynamic that's at work here?
Well, look, piracy...
A legal European equivalent, that is, obviously.
Not really, no. Look,
okay.
Piracy's everywhere. Everyone knows that, and if you... I've seen various people, Newcastle fans on Twitter, try and point this out to me because they're so desperate for this takeover to go through, and they're kind of looking for moral equivalence and trying to make these sort of relative statements that piracy's everywhere. You can get it on Fire Sticks, you can get it on Kobe boxes, illegal streams all over the place. Everybody knows that, and people often in the past used to sort of think it was a sort of coming out of the Far East or Eastern Europe or wherever it might be, or just sort of dodgy garages but stealing rights and illegally streaming football matches is not new, and it's not limited to Saudi Arabia. Let's make that very, very clear. And every big organisation is aware of that and takes it very seriously. Now, one of the reasons the Premier League has done so well in terms of its broadcast revenues over the years is that it has really protected its broadcast partners. It's forged very close links with its favourite broadcast partners, the people that just keep coming back every 3 years with bigger checks, and it has tried to defend them. So if it's got a big anti-piracy operation, it opened its first overseas office a year or so ago in Singapore, specifically to put boots on the ground in that region and to do other things as well. But the anti-piracy operation in Singapore is really, really big. It takes people to court, be they, pub landlords who are showing illegal feeds, be it a guy last year who was selling beIN boxes on the Edgware Road in London, be it sort of, slightly more sophisticated illegal operations. But to go back to your question, I cannot think, and no one has been able to think of one, of an operation this sophisticated, because first of all, stealing a very large player's signal and broadcasting it via a satellite, it was quite an operation. beIN were constantly taking anti-piracy measures, and continue to do so for sort of 2 or 3 years, changing their signal, changing their feed, individually trying to switch off boxes, you name it, but there's millions of these boxes out there. That's half the problem. And beIN have always managed just to sort of kind of stay ahead. There have been some times where, and this is where it's become a really international issue, where beIN have managed to shut down beIN for a while, and this happened during the 2018 World Cup, where beIN just pinched somebody else's signal for a while. They were pinching a South American signal for a bit, a European signal, and pirating all manner of things. I have had a demonstration of a beIN box, and if illegally taking other people's intellectual property and stuff is your thing, is your bag, it's a magic box for sort of $60 in Saudi Arabia. And this is the problem here, because you've sort of created now an expectation. You've created a generation of sports fans who genuinely think you can get everything for $60 a year. So no, I don't think we have seen a pirate operation that looks as legitimate as this, that has a launch page and an electronic programming guide and has a kind of logo on a box and a logo on a remote control, and is this able to stay ahead of a very sophisticated anti-piracy operation before. That's what makes beIN different.
Do you know what? To draw a comparison from this week, it sounds like you're describing, general piracy as being the odd Twitter hack versus potentially the beIN piracy being the big Twitter hack of this week, where all the big names were taken down. Is that a sort of fair comparison, Matt?
Yeah, and this is where inevitably the conversation becomes around, well, I mean, that's not just some 2-bit operation. That is someone that has access to kind of state level resources and know-how. And I think that's probably a fair assessment of what's been going on for the last few years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen. Before we come to Newcastle, and we will, you mentioned you spoke a little bit there about the Premier League's take on this, but I'm curious because you also mentioned that whilst this is now making the ban permanent, that it has been there in some effect since 2017. What is the Premier League's line on the fact that it's not really been possible to legally watch the Premier League in Saudi Arabia for 3 years?
Well, the Premier League's been really consistent, to be honest. It, as I said, has a really good track record in this area and goes to bat for its broadcast partners when they've got an issue like this. And this is one of the reasons why that WT report came about and why it went in that direction, very much against Saudi Arabia. It's that the Premier League and many other rights holders, I mean, there was a big organised effort. It started about 2 years ago, but various letters have gone out that the Premier League were pretty much in the vanguard of. FIFA, then UEFA, Bundesliga, La Liga, Serie A, Liga 1. It's about 7. Yeah, it's the big leagues plus FIFA and UEFA. To just constantly calling on the Saudi authorities, what are you doing? You need to stamp this out. You are stealing our stuff and you are endangering our business model. And there are very real consequences of that. Jobs will go. The value of our assets, the value of our products will fall, and people will notice that eventually. So that's been the Premier League message. And the Premier League have tried with those other partners 9 times in the last 3 years to take legal action against beIN. Now, the reason that's failed is to do with these WTO treaties on intellectual property. The idea being, if someone is stealing your stuff, if someone is pirating you or hacking you or creating counterfeit goods, you are meant to take action in the jurisdiction where the offence is taking place. And anyone that has sort of signed up to these WTO agreements, agrees to facilitate that, agrees to follow those rules. Now, the problem that anyone that's encountered trying to tackle beIN is they go to a Saudi law firm and say, right, will you take us on, please? We want to take beIN to the court through the Saudi courts. And they say, no. Or they'll say yes, and then they'll say no. Presumably when someone is telling them, no, don't take that case. Now, they've tried 9 times. So, Qatar, the Premier League, beIN have all hit this cul-de-sac, and that is what has forced beIN to go through this really circuitous route through WTO and through international arbitration, which is going to take a while to get what they wanted, which was to have this, well, in their view, illegal ban lifted. So the Premier League have watched this and backed beIN.
That's interesting. It's good to know, because the temptation for me as someone who hasn't read a huge amount about this is to believe that the narrative has suddenly spiked as Newcastle entered the picture, but that doesn't sound like it's the case. Can I ask you, Matt, to speculate on the foreign policy objectives of Saudi Arabia? Is that possible? Because everything that you say sounds like this is a bad idea. Like, this doesn't make any sense, and I'm sure that it does. But what beyond scoring points in a sort of a domestic regional ongoing dispute? Beyond that, what are the possible advantages of this type of, it seems pretty aggressive action? It is
aggressive. I have to probably just remember that I'm a football journalist, so I don't want to get too much into Saudi, Qatari relations and the
it's just fascinating.
But what I can say, I can sort of state some of the facts. And in June 2017, half a dozen countries broke off diplomatic relations with Qatar. They denied Qatar access to airspace. They started an economic blockade. Pretty serious stuff. And the reasons for this are, a little bit more historic. There's been, almost a sort of family level dispute. Qatar was supposed to be a member of the UAE, was supposed to be one of the Emirates. It didn't. It chose to go its own way. Close links between the families that run these 3 countries.
And the Iran stuff as well, right?
Well, we're going to get to that. I mean, there is sort of, as I say, sort of close, jealousies and economic rivalries and who's up, who's down, and then of course Qatar finds itself a little bit wedged in. Suddenly has lots of cash because it has these huge gas in particular and oil resources, and wants to sort of stamp its mark a little bit, and be more independent and. Not be pushed around by Saudi and the UAE to such an extent, and very probably has been fostering closer relations with Turkey and Iran. Now, you can argue that's sensible, that because they are small, they have to be friendly to people. Friendlier anyway than Saudi and UAE might feel they need to be, and that again has caused issues in the area. So Qatar's perceived closeness to the great enemy, Iran, a lot of this is wrapped up in the Sunni Shiite split within the Islamic faith, and just Iran being sort of a traditional big power in that region, and being sort of the natural opponent, I guess, of Sunni Saudi Arabia, and Turkey as well, a regional player. So Qatar has perhaps been friendlier with the other side than Saudi and the UAE would like them to be. And then I think the other bit of it has been Al Jazeera and beIN. So there is a very sort of kind of specific broadcasting bit. So the Arab Spring that kind of erupted all over the place. Al Jazeera was sort of almost the channel that broke that covered that. And certainly many people, lots of people in Saudi Arabia, for example, thought, why are you, washing our dirty linen in public like that? Why are you stoking it up? Why are you giving a platform to the Muslim Brotherhood and other organisations that are threatening our domestic security? So that's where you get into this. Not only are you in cahoots with Iran, the great enemy, but you appear to be giving a platform to sort of internal opposition in many Arab countries. So Qatar became just the bad boys. They just became this sort of, you're just causing trouble. And that hasn't really gone away. And when you hear, and this was all in the WTO report as well, the Saudi defense against all this stuff was national security. We're not cooperating with Qatar. We're not cooperating with beIN. We see them as a sort of Al Jazeera Sport, basically. And Al Jazeera Sport are a network that give a platform to terrorists. So no, you're right. We're not respecting their intellectual property for good reason. So that's why it's so bitter. And that, I think, is where, what are they playing at? Well, they're playing at because they really, really want to take Qatar down. They want to bring Qatar to heel. Qatar says, what are you talking about? You're bullying us. Rubbish. We're not backing terrorism. The truth. You choose where you sit on that range of views.
Yeah, I think, and just something I wanted to add to that as well. I remember finding this very interesting when I read about it last year. The sort of natural Qatari view, or the Qataris' view of themselves as a country. They see themselves as, I can't remember the Arabic term for it now, but essentially in English it means that mediators for the region, and that it is historically a country and a location that has held many peace talks between, well, I guess opponents that you would never consider would meet to discuss things. Like, for example, people from the US military and Al-Qaeda met in Qatar to discuss terms. And I think that's very closely linked with how the Qataris see themselves as a country, both historically, but also now as a result of unearthing the gas fields in the North Sea, that they now have the economic ability to be able to be more forceful with that perception of themselves, which leads us to discussions about potentially closer relations with Iran, certainly than the rest of the Gulf does, because they would view themselves as a country that would speak to everybody rather than not. And I think it's just important to make that point as well, because I suppose there are divisions in the Persian Gulf that are perhaps too complex for a football podcast. But Matt, we certainly have tried, and I think you did a really good job. Thanks very much for doing that.
No, and I like that idea of Qatar's sort of historic view of itself. which would have been born from a sort of sense of weakness. So, we're not big and strong enough to throw our weight around. So we'll be the middle child, right? We'll be Switzerland here. And the fact that it has this kind of key geographic position as well, it kind of juts out into the Persian Gulf. It's a strategic sort of place that until it got really, really rich really quickly, that was its strength, its position. And it was also kind of small enough not to annoy anybody. So it played that role really nicely. Fortunately, unfortunately, depending on which way you want to look at it, it's changed, and it now has a desire to be a bit more than that. And the bidding for the World Cup was you can't think of a better example. That inevitably annoyed the Saudis.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk now about the team, which is I don't know whether they are or not at the centre of certainly this phase of the dispute. Seb, would you like to bring Newcastle into the conversation for us?
Well, yeah, I think, Matt, something that confused me and probably troubles a few other people is when this latest development occurred, I read in a few places that those at the heart of the Newcastle United takeover believed that these two issues were separate, that one wouldn't have any influence on the other. How can that be so, given the people involved here?
I've read the same things as you. I've tried to speak to people about this. My personal take is that the people who are trying to put this deal together, so this, of course, is the proposed takeover of Newcastle United is basically 80% funded by the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Public Investment Fund, one of the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world, that traditionally was based on spending Saudi's oil money on projects to diversify the Saudi economy, which is perfectly legitimate. It's a really good idea. It's lots of sovereign wealth funds are designed to do. In more recent years, has become a bit more glitzy, showing offy, a bit more ambitious in what it's trying to do. It's been sort of kind of shopping in different places, buying stakes in new IT, techie sort of things like Uber and the entertainment sector. It's become very closely aligned to Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. He's kind of sort of taken it under his wing and very much uses it as sort of as part of his power base in Saudi Arabia, and it's closely tied to his vision for the country, 2030, the Vision 2030, which again is all based upon diversification of the Saudi economy, really growing its tourism and entertainment sector, becoming a bit more like, if you will, sort of Dubai and Qatar, dare I say, using sport and tourism to sort of do that and to give Saudi Arabia a slightly different profile. So the fact that the Public Investment Fund, basically an investment arm of the Saudi government, is trying to buy a club. Well, there is then a close link, then, isn't there, between Saudi-Qatari relations, between a possible piracy operation run by the Saudi state to diminish Qatar. There is a link there. And the Premier League, of course, as I say, even long way before anyone was talking about Newcastle, had issues with Saudi Arabia and was frustrated with Saudi Arabia, was frustrated with the Saudi Arabian government. So there is a link, whether Newcastle United fans or the other partners in this proposed takeover. Amanda Staveley, a British businesswoman who has been based in the Middle East for a while and has sort of built her reputation on being a network and a sort of deal maker for Middle Eastern states, and the Reuben brothers, who are massive, very successful property developers in the UK. So Staveley's going to take a 10% stake, basically for sort of putting the deal together and being the kind of public face of it, certainly in this country. And the Reuben brothers presumably are going to get 10% because of their expertise in property in Newcastle. So hopefully a really big regeneration project in Newcastle, similar to the one we've seen in Manchester, East Manchester with Manchester City. So that's the idea. So when I hear from the takeover camp that it's completely different, well, I'm sorry, they're wrong.
This is the bit that I struggle with as well.
And they've been wrong on this from the beginning. I understand that they completely underestimated the importance of the piracy issue, the importance of the BLQ. They basically didn't get it, and they've learned the hard way. And so when I hear, and a lot of this is sort of nods and winks and suggestions. I'm sorry, I've lost. I'm not saying I've lost faith in their ability to get the deal done and other parts of it, but they've been wrong on piracy since the beginning. Now, what is happening in the background, that could be something completely different, is what we've just witnessed this week. Is this the beginning of another way to get this deal done? So for a long time, it did look like the only way to get this deal done would be for Saudi to sort of, kind of back down, basically, and to allow beIN back into its market and to round up the usual suspects and really put a lid on BLQ. That seemed to be the most straightforward way to do this. And that was the way, frankly, that most people I spoke to thought this was going to go. It was certainly the preferred, considered easiest way. I think we were all perhaps maybe being a bit naive, maybe, and we were underestimating the importance of face and the importance of pride and all that in Saudi, in Gulf affairs, and the idea that Saudi were going to back down in this dispute with Qatar in any way. Perhaps we were being naive. So the new theory, or the sort of the other theory, is no. This is Saudi Arabia very aggressively telling the Premier League, no, we're not going to do that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to beIN's out. Forget beIN. Deal with that. Live with that. Here's our solution. Give us a deal. Give us a deal. We will legally buy your rights, and there will be a legal Saudi version of beIN, and that'll be great for you, and it'll be great for us. Saudi people can watch Premier League football, Newcastle United, legally, and you've got a new broadcast partner. And who knows, when the Middle East and North Africa rights come up again in 2022, that Saudi state broadcaster, that Saudi new operation, and there's a couple of ideas waiting in the wings, will take on beIN, and we can have a great big auction, and everyone can be happy. Now, there's a problem with that. As of Monday, Tuesday, as of the beginning of this week, no one had told beIN that they are the legal rights holder, and it did kind of assume that the Premier League would want to go almost on a country by country basis. Now, they do have country deals, but certainly in that region, the Middle East North Africa deal makes sense because there are lots of smaller countries there. There's only a few that you would perhaps consider to have an individual relationship with. It's not a new thing. It's not a relatively new idea that you'd have a regional deal there. Lots of other sectors, lots of other companies, lots of other organisations deal with MENA in the same way. And if Saudi Arabia wants a national deal, what's to stop Bahrain, Egypt, UAE? Suddenly the Premier League are going to have 15 different deals when they used to have one really good one. So I think there are two problems with that theory, and in the last 2 or 3 days, there frankly has been no news on what this means. Is this one hand of the Saudi government not knowing what the other is doing? Is this a fit of pique on behalf of the Saudi government because they are looking at, they're looking and listening to the negotiations around Newcastle, and they're thinking, well, this isn't going our way. That's it, taking our ball home, and frankly, sod beIN, or is it this, right, let's try and manoeuvre the Premier League into a position where they have to deal with us, and if this is going to happen, they need to give us a national deal, and presumably whatever money we give the Premier League will be then paid to beIN as compensation, but that's not going to happen soon, is it? So this is for Newcastle United fans, none of those sound that great in terms of getting this done quickly.
So if those two things are related, and in a hypothetical future we see a deal for Newcastle get over the line, and we see Saudi Arabia either offered a national subscription that they can administer domestically, or potentially even outbidding beIN at the next bidding process for 2022 for the whole region. Is it not hard to look at that and think, I know you described it as manoeuvring, but is it not hard to look at that and not think that looks a little bit like it could be interpreted as bribery?
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing that when I've talked about, could this be what they're trying to do? And I've spoken to sort of experts in this field, lawyers and academics and people, just analysts of the industry, and they said, well, look, yeah, okay. I mean, I can see that as a sort of there's a rationale to it. If you have this political impasse between two states and it's implacable and they're just not going to get, they're not going to go in the way that we want them to go. Could a best case scenario be, right, rip up that deal or rip up a bit of that deal, give the Saudis the carve out they want, use that money then to compensate the wronged party. Hopefully we can all move on and put this behind us, takeover goes through. What sort of precedent does that set? That's not really sort of getting off on a good foot in terms of dealing with people in good faith and how you approach commercial relationships, and do you respect contracts? What message does that send out to other rights holders in other regions who may well have, I don't know, a beef with another country or a club or a company? It potentially opens a can of worms. I mean, like I say, the Premier League's success is based on its ability to sell its rights around the world to legitimate companies who pay good money for it. They win these rights in auctions, and then the Premier League provides a good product, invests that money in stadiums and players and managers, etc., and comes to protect you, comes to bat for you when you have an issue. This looks like the Premier League kind of caving in and making up things as they go along, and it raises serious questions at a really strange time for the Premier League, for all of us, but for the Premier League in particular, really, it's never needed broadcast money. It's never needed good relations with its broadcast partners more than it does right now. We're finishing one season behind closed doors, and it's effectively the only cash coming in is TV cash and a bit of sponsorship money. But that sponsorship money is only still coming in because of the platform that the broadcasters are giving their name and their logos. So even next year, we hope to get fans back in and hopefully all the fans back in at some point next season. It's going to be a while for things to settle down, and we're going to be dealing with the economic implications of the last few months for at least a year, 18 months, perhaps 2 years. Broadcast money has never been more important. Does the Premier League really want to jeopardise what it's built to just placate and to soothe Saudi pride? It just seems very risky to me.
No more reason than that, I think, is needed for the Premier League to seriously consider and spend some time investigating the OTT streaming model. Because if you're going to be in a situation where states or sovereign wealth funds, effectively states, own football clubs that operate in your league and also participate in the process of buying and selling broadcasting packages for that league, then you're going to leave yourself open to potentially complicated situations. Whereas if you own and operate everything that's being streamed, then I assume that closes one particular door. Hey Matt, thanks so much. I find this topic endlessly interesting, and I think with any decades-old regional dispute, there will be more to the story. So if you will come back and do this again in, I don't know, whenever, I mean every day hopefully, but when the next instalment occurs, I'd love to reconvene and discuss this more. But thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, you're welcome. At some point, this deal is either going to go through, or it's going to officially fall apart, fall down.
Do you think so though? Because a bit like lockdown, I'm kind of feeling like it may be there forever now, just sort of in perpetuity. Yeah. It'll just become a fixture of the Premier League.
Yeah, maybe.
It'll just float in the ether by itself. Yeah.
A club in limbo. I mean, Newcastle fans think they've been in limbo for a decade anyway. I mean, God, no one would wish that on them. Surely even Sunderland fans. I mean, that's just awful.
Hey, the bell is ringing in the bank below where I live, which seems to happen
that
at this
means it's the
time.
end of the podcast. Yeah.
It does. I mean, I think maybe I've never noticed
School's
before,
out.
but I think it might be 10 to 3 every day that happens. So I do believe that calls the end. Matt, thank you so much. We'll hopefully speak to you again soon. And Seb, thanks to you also.
Thanks,
welcome.
Joe.
And goodbye to everyone who's listening. Goodbye.